Good morning. Sorry to leave folks waiting a little bit. We've had warmer days, but we've had colder days. So we'll get started to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to say good morning. I'm at-large Councilmember Robert White and chair of the DC Council Housing Committee. I called this press conference because last week a whistleblower shared a new complaint with my office about DCHA, which, when taken with several other internal investigation reports the Committee on Housing has received from the agency, paints a picture of extensive unethical and illegal behavior occurring throughout the agency. This substantiates what our residents unfortunately already know and experience. This is an agency that is not adhering to its mission. When I took over as chair of the Committee on Housing, I promised to do things differently and bring unprecedented transparency and accountability to DCHA with the goal of making DCHA the most impactful public housing agency in the country. Today, I will outline the reports that I find most concerning, as well as what I'm calling for to incite change, and I'll be glad to answer questions at the end. The first internal investigation report, which I'll call the DCHA Employee Voucher Scheme at Rise, involves a DCHA employee giving vouchers to friends and family who were not eligible for placement at the Rise at Temple Courts building. The Rise building is supposed to serve as long overdue replacement housing for people whom the district has displaced a decade ago by demolishing Temple Courts public housing. The evidence suggests that a former DCHA employee who was supposed to oversee providing vouchers to displaced former residents gave those vouchers to friends and family who were not even, some of them, district residents. The report also notes allegations from the former employee's co-workers that this individual had a practice of collecting and pocketing personal so-called fees from voucher applicants. Of the 61 vouchers for replacement units at the Rise building, 53 of those vouchers are questionable. In other words, the employee appears to have turned an important service into an opportunity for personal gain. I made this report public in February. The second investigation, which I'll call the Landlord Voucher Steering Conspiracy, suggests that a DCHA employee received payment from a landlord before getting hired at the agency, then, once they worked at DCHA, allegedly steered voucher recipients toward this landlord's building. Another voucher division employee allegedly went out of their way to fill the landlord's units with voucher holders with the expectation of payment. Both I and the Stabilization and Reform Board received this investigation report earlier this month as a result of my push for increased transparency. I'm making it available today along with the other reports I'm discussing. The third investigation I'll detail today is the Verbosity Report, which found alleged contract steering. As several of you know from your reporting, the investigation found that DCHA awarded the Verbosity contract without seeking competitive bids, and that procurement leadership evaded board oversight by splitting this contract amount into two smaller emergency contracts. There also is an allegation that DCHA leadership terminated an employee in retaliation for his refusal to participate in what he viewed as an unlawful cover-up. Finally, last week I received an additional complaint of serious criminal behavior at the agency that I have forwarded to law enforcement for an investigation, and at their request will not speak further to these allegations today. These allegations are not simply personnel issues that can be resolved by firing the employees involved or drafting conflict of interest policies and sweeping it under the rug. I believe these investigations are a critical part of the story of how our voucher system, from the start with who gets DCHA vouchers to the finish line at the building where voucher holders end up living, is getting corrupted and not consistently meeting the needs of our residents. The same goes for contract awards. The process of soliciting bids and board oversight exists to prevent fraud, to prevent abuse, and to get the best possible services for public housing residents, services rendered with taxpayer money. With the historic investments the district made in housing these past few years, we should have seen a dramatic reduction in the public housing work orders backlog, and we should have seen more people pulled off of the DCHA public housing waiting list. Instead, we still have over 10,000 open maintenance work orders, many of them urgent, and over 2,000 public housing units that people need, which are uninhabitable. These facts point to deeper problems at the agency. As we enter leaner financial times, oversight and corrective action are more important than ever. I have brought my concerns to Director Donald. I have shared criminal issues with the Inspector General. I'm not going to wait for more scandals or criminal activity to emerge in dribs and drabs while we use up resources triaging each one. I'm not prepared to chase my tail when I see patterns of wrongdoing that require us to be proactive and to get to the bottom of the issues, making our public housing agency less effective than we need it to be. We need it all out on the table so that we can deal with it, change the culture and expectations, and move forward. There is no path forward without getting to the bottom of the breadth of these issues and instilling trust in the agency through full transparency. I'm making 5 calls to action today to further oversight, to do further oversight and root out bad behavior and unethical activities that appear to pervade DCHA. First, I'm asking the Inspector General to open a broad investigation into any theft and contract steering occurring within DCHA, engaging other law enforcement as necessary. 2, I'm calling on people with knowledge of wrongdoing within DCHA to report it to the Inspector General, to the DCHA Office of Audit and Compliance, and to the DC Council Housing Committee. If you have information about waste, fraud, or abuse, contact the Office of the Inspector General at 202-724-TIPS, T-I-P-S, or fill out a complaint form at www.oig.dc.gov. Contact the DCHA Office of Audit and Compliance at 1-888-535-3993, or reach out directly to the Housing Committee at housing@dccouncil.gov. 3, if these steps result in a significant volume of issues to investigate, I will work with my council colleagues to add capacity for this purpose in the Office of the Inspector General and at the Office of Audit and Compliance at DCHA. 4, I am calling on Director Donald to provide a plan at the Committee on Housing's DCHA budget hearing on April 10th for how the agency will look into any other waste and fraud schemes and take immediate steps to transform the agency's culture. Finally, I will introduce legislation to create more transparency and accountability at DCHA, but I want to be clear, there is no law that can fix DCHA without a sharp culture change and the right leadership. As the chair of the Housing Committee, and more as a Washingtonian who has watched as people struggle to keep a roof over their head and fight slum conditions, it makes me so angry that people who are paid with taxpayer money to house and protect some of the most vulnerable people in our community have acted entirely in self-interest and have profited off of displacement. And I am angry that the leadership culture failed to prioritize and elevate serious issues, but instead try to quash them quietly at the expense of taking the opportunity to investigate and fix them holistically. Prior to my tenure as chair of the Housing Committee, it appears serious audits were not going to the DCHA board, they were not going to the council, and they were not pursued further. And where criminal activity was involved, it appears DCHA did not transfer the information to law enforcement. These responses stymie progress. They allow actions like the ones discussed today to continue in an agency that many in the community believe is steering vouchers and contracts. To the district residents who deserve DCHA to be a high-functioning agency, know that I see what you are doing, and I see what you're dealing with, and it is not okay. From inhumane living conditions in many public housing units, to waiting months or years to be housed after getting approved for a voucher, we have to do better. I know these reports are not news to many of you, and you've been waiting for things to get better. I'm going to continue visiting our public housing, continue meeting with residents and voucher recipients, and doing my oversight work to help you and our agency. For the people who have been brave enough at this point to report wrongdoing, thank you. Your courage is helping shine a light on the problems that we have to fix. To the DCHA employees in the Office of Audit and Compliance, your thorough and diligent work investigating the many allegations of wrongdoing is making a real difference. For every DCHA employee and contractor who wants the agency to do good, please keep working to that end. I will work tirelessly with my council colleagues and with the Inspector General to ensure misconduct and self-dealing end now. I'd be glad to take as many questions as I can. I do have a meeting immediately following this, so if we could try to keep it to about a minute per reporter, I'd appreciate it so that we can get through as many questions as possible. I can't share any more information on the new allegation at this time. It is being investigated by law enforcement, and per their advice, I'm not going to mention any more details.
Is the Attorney General involved in any of these allegations?
The Attorney General's office is not involved, to my knowledge, at this point.
Counselor, can you talk about Director Donald and the reaction that she had when you brought this to her office? What was her reaction to these allegations?
I shared with Director Donald my concern that as I read reports, I see patterns of consistent behavior across different parts of the agency that appear to reflect pervasive actions and a culture. Director Donald disagreed. I responded in detail to explain why I believe this showed a pattern. I gave citations to what I was looking at in reports. I asked in response for how she reached a different conclusion, and I did not receive that response.
So do you think that she's part of the problem?
Everything I know at this point, you know now. It is up to the Inspector General. We will continue to do oversight work, and the board has a job to do as well. The board is looking at the same information that I'm looking at. There are still a lot of open questions about when things happen, what the director knew, what the director should have known. And so as we get more information, I'm going to look to the board to make that decision. But if the board doesn't make a recommendation, certainly I will. I've always been clear that charting a new course for DCHA is like a three-legged stool. You need good leadership inside the agency, you need a strong board, and you need good oversight from the council. So I believe that we're moving in the right direction. I've appreciated a lot of work I've seen from the new board. I've seen them push back, I've seen them reject proposals, and they're still just getting started in their work, but I think they're doing a good job at this point.
Okay.
The most urgent need people are dealing with is fixing units. There are people living in units that have had conditions that have lingered for years. They want them fixed. There are rodent and infestation issues at many housing properties that have to get addressed. That is why I've pushed so hard for more funding to address the facilities issues at these public housing agencies. But what I see from people living in public housing and people working in the agency that reach out for help and assistance is a lack of faith that something's actually going to happen and change. And I want to make sure we do our work transparently, that I share what I'm finding and my concerns, so that people know that folks are paying attention as we work together to fix it.
Councilmember White, Chris Williams from Southwest Voice. We reported a couple of years ago on whistleblower allegations from a former employee at the Housing Authority with respect to the Greenleaf redevelopment. What is the status of the Greenleaf redevelopment with respect to these type of allegations?
To my knowledge, I've not received any allegations specific to Greenleaf, so I will have to do some work to find what you're mentioning, and I will review that.
Councilmember, a couple of weeks ago, the IG put out a note to everyone saying there's been a couple of DC agencies that have not been covered with information. Are you aware of other IG investigations of the Housing Authority before your comment?
I will let the IG respond to what they are and are not investigating. Anything that has to do with criminal activity in any of my agencies, I immediately report to the IG.
One more, the audits you mentioned that had not been passed on to the board. Can you describe how many and the nature of those audits?
We have received 7 audits to this point since I took over in January. The audits are now being shared with the council and with the board.
Obviously, you're the chairman of the committee. This is pretty dramatic. I mean, why was it this important for you to have a news conference like this?
I promised when I took over oversight of housing that I was going to do things differently and get to the bottom of it. The council doesn't have every power in the world, and so when I need information and I can't get it, I'm going to do what I need to do to get that information because I have an obligation to get it. When I believe issues are not being taken seriously, I'm gonna call it out. My interest is making sure the agency is moving in a different direction. In order to do that, there has to be a level of transparency that does not exist to this point. And I will say also, my oversight work with DCHA has met more resistance than with any agency I've worked with since I've been on the council. There needs to be a culture change. DCHA has to step into the modern era and operate the way that public agencies operate. Audit reports for any other agency, everybody gets them. When the Inspector General investigates something in any other agency, everybody gets them. When the chair says, hey, I need information on a bonus that is taxpayer money, that information comes to the council. I'm not going to spend day after day begging for information. That should be routine.
And you're hoping that this is going to shake it loose.
It will shake it loose. I also want people, again, the other point that's important, I don't want this information to continue to come out in dribs and drabs. I want us to get to the bottom of what's going on so that we can turn the corner.
Councilmember, with the IG.
I'm sorry? Let me finish working on the legislation before I comment on it. We have a number of provisions that I believe are going to go into the bill, but I want to make sure we are we are creating the strongest possible bill. I know some of my colleagues have some thoughts as well. Let me take 2 more questions.
How long could it possibly take for the IG to complete their work? So how long are residents looking at to actually get change?
I wish I could give you the answer to that question. The IG generally does not share their timelines with the council, which is something that I've always known, but they are well equipped to do the work they need to do. There's a lot of good staff inside DC Housing Authority, but there are a number of people engaged in wrongdoing. That's not going to help us move the agency along in an area where we need to do that. As long as the agency has a reputation for being defensive, for not being transparent, and for wrongdoing going on inside the agency, the best and brightest, the people who can bring about this change, are not going to go into the agency. I want this agency to be right for the best and brightest, for the people who are in there to get things fixed. And the only way to attract those people and to retain the ones who are already in there is to show that we take these issues seriously and that we're going to turn the corner.
What is the director's office saying that they were not made aware of?
I want to thank you. I do have to get to a meeting. I apologize, but I may be able to answer questions later today after
Can you just answer right now why the director's office is saying that they were not made aware of this day,
weren't made aware of.
this event today?
If they weren't aware, they wouldn't be here.
No,
So
that your office did not make them aware.
if they were not aware, they would not be here.
So you're saying your office made them aware?
I did make them aware. They found out from press before they were found out from me, but they were made aware, and I don't know what else to say about that. Thank you.
Awesome. That was great. How are you doing?